There are significant places in the world which belong to humanity, where people have taken certain steps forward. When Augustine came from Rome at the behest of St. Gregory in 597 and established his little community here, he was both enfolding England into a European family and at the same time setting down a root of English-speaking Christendom which would grow and flower across many nations.
We are today maintaining a tradition that's been going on for more than 1,400 years, and it's our job to keep this alive and to present it to the people who come next to us. But we are still able to perform and give people understanding of all the great heritage of music which has been through this place over those 1,400 years.
It's really a Cook's tour of English cathedral style, architectural style. It's got everything. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful building.
We do have a large number of documents that are far older than any of the visible standing fabric. The cathedral, right from its earliest years, was a place of study, and that has continued really right until the present day. The earliest dated document is dated 742, but it's actually a forgery. It's a little bit later than what it says on the tin.
It is the largest collection of early medieval stained glass we have in this country. It still is an awe-inspiring experience to be here, to stand in front of these windows and to just have this colour affect you.
For believers, it's a vastly important witness to the continuity of prayer, to martyrdom, to the courage of the Church in the face of the state, all of those things. But for everybody, I think, it's a door into a different world, a different dimension.
It's very hard to express this in words, but one just needs to look at the entrance of the cathedral and see everybody coming, and they just turn and look at the space and amazed that man could have built it. The craftsmen we have around here, we could do it again, but we just need to keep funding a programme continually to keep the whole thing going in perpetuity.
There's an enormous amount of work to do. It's a huge building. You want to maintain as much of the original fabric as possible, and in order to do that you have to make sort of regular interventions to prop it up, keep it going, hand it on to the next generation. That's what people before us have done.
Our most important role in many ways is to ensure the survival of the documents in our care, some of which date back to the 8th century, and to ensure that they survive for future generations. That is absolutely key. There's an unbroken tradition of record keeping.
So we use the best materials, we use them in the best way, and we're getting roof coverings on this building which are 150 years old. Now, if the roof covering on most houses lasted 150 years, we'd be thrilled to bits, wouldn't we? It's because we're spending a lot of money to make things last as long as possible, because it's a place of continuity. It's a place of continuity in building form, but it's also a place of continuity in spiritual form, and it means so much to people who return that it hasn't changed greatly.
Well, we're about 90 feet up at the easternmost end of the cathedral, on the roof of the Corona Chapel. And it was built originally, we think, to house the crown of Becket's head that was severed during his murder. It's a really good example of how the cathedral has continued to be amended, repaired and looked after over succeeding generations. These walls here are unfinished medieval walls, and they were in a very bad state, so much so that by the 1700s they built these cappings that you can see all around us. Those 18th century cappings deteriorated to such an extent that they had to be repaired again in the 1920s, and now we're repairing them again.
Fine, we have here a box of parchment volumes that were actually damaged in a fire in 1670. They're court rolls, so there's a lot of really interesting information. with a project perhaps funded by a legacy, we could repair and reopen volumes like this and thus make them available after over 300 years of inaccessibility. This is one of our key documents. It dates from 1072 and it's known as the Accord of Winchester. The Archbishop's current status derives to a certain extent from this document. But what is also of particular interest are the signatures. So what we have is actually the autograph cross of the then king in 1072, who was, of course, William the Conqueror. This book was commissioned by the Friends of Canterbury Cathedral in 1939. It's a fabulous record of all the heraldic shields in the cloisters, and it is an exceptional example of the calligrapher's art and also of the heraldic artist's art. So it uses high quality materials and a very high level of skill. Now, what we're showing you now are items from the vestments of Archbishop Hubert Walter. Extremely rare survival. Now, with funds kindly donated by the Friends of the Cathedral, we had these items repackaged. Hubert Walter died in 1205, and they have survived extraordinarily well. The vestments don't match. He must have looked a riot.
There's an element of simply being the guardian of what you received. This is a precious legacy, an immeasurably precious legacy that's come into our hands. We mustn't let it slip like water through our fingers. We need to be responsible for it. But much more deeply than that, everything this place stands for communicates through it in ways that words can't always express. It's really crucially important that people encounter faith and vision and dedication and sacrifice, not in ideas, but in the images, in the very stones of this place.
Working on a building like this, one's very intimate with it, very intimate indeed, and one's looking at individual stones, individual pieces of slate. One gets down to that level. And so one does actually think, I'm putting that there. How long is that going to last? It's alongside a piece of stone which has been there for 1,000 years. And so you do feel that one's giving that continuity. But it is amazing to stand there some days and think, a guy in probably 200 years is going to look at that stone and say, they did a good job.
We've got over 400 square meters of medieval glass. We've got in all about 1,500 square meters of stained glass. These windows have two major functions. One is as a weather shield. They keep the building watertight. But that means that everything the weather can throw at them is thrown at them. The other function is, of course, they are works of art. They are works of instruction. They're historic documents. They are art historic documents. Once you get a really close view of these windows, you're actually horrified to see in what bad state they are. If any museum had even the smallest bit of that stained glass, they wouldn't dream of leaving it outside to get rained on. But we just haven't had the resources and the time to get around to protecting all of it.
As I travel the world, the name Canterbury speaks very loud. It speaks much louder than other places one might think of in the country. We have a huge responsibility to give to those around the world who expect things from us.
You could see these windows as a medieval fundraising exercise, because some of them even show you what happens if you don't pay up, and we don't do that today. We don't attach penalties for not paying, but in the Middle Ages, people were told, if you miss showing your gratitude, Thomas à Becket will come and get you.
One has to appreciate that the church, particularly Canterbury Cathedral, receives no external funding from any body at all, apart from those giving gifts. Most people do give a little money. Others give a great deal of money, like the people who paid for this cloister to be done and had their heraldry put on the ceiling in recognition. It's just like putting a piece of stone in by giving a small contribution, and it builds up into a large amount eventually, and we can carry on looking after the building.
We're designated a World Heritage Site. It is immensely costly to maintain. I think that if we are not able to keep Canterbury both standing and also developing in a creative way into the future, then something will be lost, which is a loss not just to the church, but also to humanity at large.
I think visiting a uniquely great cathedral like this is a time of renewal. It's a time when you can actually step into a world that you're not really familiar with and see yourself differently and see your whole life and your whole set of projects differently. And I would want this place to go on being a place where that kind of renewal happens.